You know those moments in life where you step back into a place that's supposed to wrap you up in warmth, like an old blanket fresh from the dryer. But instead, it slaps you across the face with a cold, unforgiving reality that makes your stomach twist into knots. And you can't help but wonder if the universe is playing some cruel joke on you? That's exactly how it felt when I pulled up to my family's old homestead in Pine Ridge, after 5 long years away, chasing dreams in the city that never sleeps, leaving behind the dust and the memories of simpler times, only to find that the peace I craved had been shattered, replaced by something that reeked of entitlement and deception, pulling me into a nightmare I never saw coming. I remember unlocking the gate with that rusty key I'd kept on my chain all these years, the one that symbolized roots and belonging, imagining I'd just sweep away the cobwebs. Maybe crack open a beer on the porch while watching the sunset paint the hills in hues of orange and gold, reclaiming that slice of serenity that had been in my family for generations, a haven where my grandparents had laughed and loved, where I'd learned to ride a bike and dream big under starlit skies. But as I swung the door open, my heart pounding with anticipation, there it was, staring back at me like a bad dream I couldn't wake from, a sleek, modern house, all glass windows and manicured lawns, squatting right on what should have been my empty lot, as if someone had decided my absence was an invitation to rewrite history. And in that instant, the air grew thick with confusion, anger bubbling just beneath the surface, making me question everything I thought I knew about home and ownership. And then she appeared, like a character straight out of one of those suburban thriller movies, striding across the grass with that clipboard in hand, her heels clicking against the pavement in a rhythm that screamed authority, her smile too wide, too practiced, the kind that hides daggers behind perfect teeth. Mrs. Evelyn Hart, the self-appointed queen of the Willow Creek Community Association, her eyes scanning me like I was some intruder in my own backyard. And before I could even stammer out, "Hello," she launched into her spiel, declaring with unwavering confidence that this land had been absorbed into the Willow Creek fold years ago, that boundaries had shifted like sands in the wind, and now, if I wanted to set foot here without facing the wrath of the law, I'd have to join their little club, cough up back fees for the past 5 years plus penalties that could bankrupt a small nation, all while she waved a map that looked official but felt wrong in every fiber of my being, threatening me with trespassing charges on the very soil where I'd buried my childhood pets and planted my first tree. It hit me like a freight train. This wasn't just a mix-up, some innocent clerical error that could be sorted with a phone call and a laugh over coffee. No, this was calculated, a bold claim on what was mine, wrapped in the veneer of community rules and neighborly smiles. But underneath, it pulsed with greed and manipulation, making my blood boil as I stood there, fists clenched, trying to process how someone could look you in the eye and rewrite your reality without a shred of remorse. And in that moment, the hook sank deep. I wasn't just fighting for land. I was battling for justice, for the legacy of my family, for the principle that no one, no matter how polished their facade, gets to steal what's rightfully yours and call it progress. As the shock settled into a simmering rage, I dove headfirst into the paperwork, my mind racing through memories of family gatherings on that porch, the laughter echoing against the trees, now threatened by this absurd demand in a formal letter from the Willow Creek Community Association, outlining how their boundaries had mysteriously expanded by about 30 to 40 feet, swallowing up chunks of my property like it was nothing, insisting I had 30 days to comply or face the consequences. Fees piling up like storm clouds on the horizon, and I couldn't shake the feeling of violation, as if they'd not only taken the land, but trampled on the invisible threads that tied me to my past, my parents' hard work, the love that had built that place brick by brick. So, I headed down to the county offices, heart heavy with doubt, but fueled by a quiet determination that whispered, "This can't be right," poring over records in that dimly lit room, the assessor confirming what my gut already knew. The boundaries hadn't budged an inch since the day my grandparents signed the deed. No variances granted by the planning department. No easements lurking in the fine print. No permits for any encroachment that could justify this land grab. And as I stared at their fabricated maps side by side with the official plat, it became crystal clear, hilariously absurd in a dark way. that this was all smoke and mirrors, a bold-faced invention designed to bully me into submission, and with each stamp of no record found. My resolve hardened, turning confusion into a burning quest for truth, because if they thought I'd roll over, they had no idea who they were dealing with. A man whose family had fought tooth and nail for every scrap of dignity, and now it was my turn to push back. With the county records backing me up like silent allies in a war I never wanted, I knew I needed ironclad proof, something undeniable that could cut through the lies like a hot knife through butter. So I called in Jordan Hale, a licensed surveyor with a reputation for precision that could make even the most skeptical bureaucrat nod in approval. And as he arrived with his drone buzzing overhead like a vigilant guardian, overlaying GIS data with pinpoint accuracy, mapping coordinates that told a story far different from Mrs. Hart's fairy tale, my anxiety mixed with a spark of hope, watching him work under the sun that beat down relentlessly, reminding me of childhood summers spent exploring these very acres, now under siege. The results were staggering, heart-wrenching in their clarity. The true boundary lines sliced right through their fancy additions, carving up the garage, the patio, the sunroom, claiming about 800 square feet that belonged to me, not them. And as Jordan hammered in those bright orange stakes, marking the real edges with unyielding certainty, it felt like a small victory, a symbolic reclaiming where truth finally took physical form, standing tall against the encroachment, and I couldn't help but chuckle inwardly at the irony. How something as simple as wooden markers could expose the fragility of their grand illusion. Yet deep down, the pain lingered, the injustice of it all gnawing at me. Because this wasn't just about square footage, it was about erasing my family's footprint, and that fueled a fire that wouldn't be easily quenched. But oh, the plot thickened when I reviewed the security footage from cameras I'd installed years ago, dusty but still operational, capturing moments that peeled back the layers of deceit like an onion that made your eyes water with rage, showing Mrs. Hart during the construction phase, her voice dripping with smug assurance as she whispered to the builders, "He doesn't even know," followed by commands to shift it just a bit further, banking on the fact that nobody measures twice. And there it was, the smoking gun, not a mere oversight, but a deliberate scheme, orchestrated with the cold calculation of someone who believed rules were for others, not for her. And as I replayed those clips, my pulse racing, a mix of horror and grim satisfaction washing over me, because now I had evidence of intent, turning this from a boundary dispute into a tale of outright fraud, and the tension built like a storm gathering force, knowing confrontation was inevitable. Then came the retaliation, petty and insidious, starting with the unmistakable sound of trash being dumped on my side at 2:37 a.m., captured crystal clear on camera. The culprit, a local hired hand who, when confronted, spilled the beans that Mrs. Hart had paid him under the table. And it was almost comical, this grown woman resorting to such childish antics, like a villain in a bad spy movie who thinks they're untouchable. But beneath the humor lay a darker undercurrent, emails flooding in from the association, accusing me of sanitation violations, complaints about imaginary dogs barking in the night, painting me as the neighborhood menace, a threat to their pristine world, all part of her strategy to control the narrative, to isolate and intimidate. And as I read those messages, my frustration mounting, I felt the weight of isolation, but also the spark of defiance, because every low blow only strengthened my bond to this land, reminding me of the love my family poured into it, and I wouldn't let her tarnish that. Enough was enough. I lawyered up, sending over the full dossier. The professional survey, drone imagery that laid it all bare, incident reports of the harassment, and those damning videos that captured her scheming in high definition, demanding an immediate cease to all coercive actions. And watching the association board begin to fracture was like seeing cracked spiderweb across a mirror. Members whispering doubts about Mrs. Hart's leadership, leaked emails revealing tampered maps, and hushed cover-ups, the trust eroding like sandcastles against the tide. And in those moments, the tension peaked, my heart racing with a blend of vindication and sorrow for the community caught in her web, because this wasn't just my fight anymore. It exposed the rot at the core, the abuse of power that preyed on the unsuspecting, and as alliances shifted, I braced for her next move, knowing desperation breeds recklessness. And sure enough, she lashed out, ordering her minions to pull that orange stake out, a direct tampering with official markers that crossed the line from civil squabble into criminal territory. Caught again on tape, her voice strained with panic, and it was almost pitiful. This once mighty figure reduced to sabotage, but the injustice of it ignited a fury in me, nailing shut the coffin on any sympathy. Because how dare she try to destroy the very evidence that upheld justice, turning our dispute into something far more serious, with law enforcement now involved, and as sirens wailed in the distance, the climax hit like a thunderclap, emotions boiling over, rage at the betrayal, grief for the lost peace, but above all, a righteous thrill that truth was finally breaking free. The courtroom loomed like a stage set for the final showdown, air thick with anticipation and the scent of polished wood, as I presented my arsenal of evidence. The original deed that bore my family's name in faded ink, the county plat maps that stood unchanging like ancient guardians, Jordan Hale's meticulous survey, the drone shots that painted an aerial truth no one could deny, and those videos that played out her deceit in vivid detail, each frame a nail in the coffin of her empire. And as the judge leaned forward, his gaze piercing, asking point-blank if there was any variance to justify the shift, any easement hidden in the archives, any denial of her orders to remove the stakes, and hearing her stammered no as echo through the room. It was a crescendo of vindication, the tension releasing in waves as the gavel came down, ordering the demolition of the encroaching structures, the restoration of my land, a permanent injunction against further access, and the right to seek damages that would make her think twice about ever playing God again. But even in victory, I offered an olive branch laced with steel, a settlement where I'd buy the house at land value, sparing the full demolition, on the condition that Mrs. Hart sign an admission of her violations, step down from the Willow Creek Community Association forever, her reign of terror ending not with a bang, but a whimper. And as she scrawled her name on that document, her hand trembling, eyes averted, it was a cinematic closure, the villain unmasked and dethroned, justice not just served but savored, allowing me to reclaim not just the property, but the peace that had been stolen, transforming the remnants into a living exhibit, a timeline of the ordeal etched into plaques, dubbed Lessons in Land Integrity, with those orange stakes preserved in glass cases as eternal reminders, because in the end, authority doesn't equate to ownership, confidence can't masquerade as truth, and the land itself remembers every footprint, every betrayal, every triumph. With the dust settled, the homestead restored, I stood on the porch at dusk, beer in hand, watching the stars emerge like old friends. The weight lifted, family legacy intact, a quiet satisfaction blooming where rage once festered, knowing that sometimes, standing up against the bullies of the world, armed with nothing but truth and tenacity, can turn the tide, and in that serenity, I found closure. A chapter closed with the villains paying their due, the innocent vindicated, life moving forward with lessons etched deep. But here's where it gets interesting. What do you think? Was my pursuit of justice too harsh? Or was it the only way to right such a profound wrong? In a world rife with power imbalances, where does the line blur between rightful retribution and overreach? And how far should one go to protect what's theirs, especially when family ties and moral integrity are on the line? I'd love to hear your take in the comments. Did I do the right thing? Or is there a gray area we're all navigating?